very much.
Thank you, Marc.
My name is Marc Bilodeau. My name is Marc Bilodeau, B-I-L-O. B-I-L-O-D-E-A-U. I'm an associate professor of economics at IUPUI. I have a little my presentation there. Whether we like it or not, there is a market for marijuana in Indiana, as we've heard. It's been estimated that about 500,000 people in Indiana have used marijuana during the last year. Now, I take it for granted that the State Assembly's objective in passing the laws that it has passed about marijuana in the past has been to reduce the quantity of marijuana consumed in Indiana. And I take it for granted that most of you may also have that as your own objective, that you don't like marijuana being consumed in Indiana and you would like it to be reduced. I personally happen to agree with this objective, except for people suffering from chronic pain for whom marijuana could be an effective and less addictive natural alternative to synthetic opiates like oxycodone. But where economists can be of use is in helping to sort out what kind of policies would best achieve this objective of discouraging marijuana from being used in this state. Now, there are two ways to reduce consumption of any good. And pardon me for using economics jargon, but it's to either reduce supply or reduce demand. The criminalization of marijuana acts on the supply side. Okay? Seizures and the threat of prosecution drive up the cost of supplying marijuana. However, it is a simple demonstration that a supply restriction policy is doomed to failure because it is going against market forces. And so you have in your possession a little diagram, just simple supply and demand diagram, which shows that when you reduce the supply, that is the supply curve shifts in, okay, you end up driving up the price of the good. Okay? And therefore, when you make, you can spend a lot of effort trying to reduce supply by intercepting drugs, by destroying plants, etc. But the higher price that results then causes a movement back up along the supply curve, and therefore this increase in the quantity available, that is a direct result of the increase in price, undoes most of what you have gained by seizing and intercepting drug, right? You seize the drugs, you destroy it, that drives up the price. As a result, it becomes more profitable for someone to step in and replace whatever you've destroyed. An analogy would be someone in a boat rowing upstream against a very strong current. That person would be exerting a lot of effort, but that does not get him to go very far. In other words, all the money that is being spent on drug interdiction is hardly making a dent on consumption. Right? The purpose of all these laws is not to just intercept drugs and destroy it. The purpose would be to reduce consumption. So that's the question to ask. Is it going to actually reduce consumption? And it turns out that that a policy of reducing supply could not make more than a dent in consumption, because the reality is that as long as there is demand for marijuana, someone will supply it. For every drug dealer put in jail, another will step forward to replace him, because high-priced drugs mean high-profit margins. The more we try to restrict supply, the more lucrative is the business of the remaining suppliers, and the more newcomers are attracted into this business. In other words, this war on drugs cannot be won this way, through trying to reduce supply. As has been commented on before, also, attempts to restrict supply also have undesirable side effects. Think about it. Since restricting supply drives up the price of drugs, it drives up it increases the expenditures of drug users to maintain their habits. And therefore, many drug users have to resort to crime in order to finance their habit. The more expensive it is, the more they run up against the fact that it takes more money to supply it. I don't know any drug user who would say, well, you know, the price of drugs have gone too far, have gone too high. I'll just do it out. That's not how they would respond. When you have either an addiction or habit to sustain, you will find the money wherever you can. So thefts, burglaries, prostitution, and gang violence are often indirectly drug-related, even though they do not appear in criminal statistics as drug offenses per se. Now, by contrast, an effective policy would try to reduce consumption through the demand side. And I have another diagram here that shows what happens when you reduce demand. The demand curve is the one that shifts in. As you can see, demand reduction, that's achieved through treatment, prevention, and education, does not fight against the market. It uses the market as an ally. When demand is lower, the price of drugs go down. You don't need then to imprison drug dealers because they couldn't make enough money trying to sell drugs, so they would drop out. Since marijuana would be less expensive, property crimes to finance drug habits would also decrease. But we can do even better to reduce consumption. What we can do is combine efforts to reduce demand through offering treatment, prevention, and education with legalization and taxation by taking advantage of the fact that the demand for drugs tend not to be very responsive to price. Many people before me have commented on the fact that the demand for drugs, drug consumption, tend not to change when you make it illegal. Well, it also doesn't change much when you increase or decrease the price. For example, I do not know the current street price of marijuana in Indianapolis because I have never bought marijuana. And if the price of marijuana fell by half, I still would not buy any. And I expect that among the 90% of Hoosiers who never use it, we would not see very many of them who would take the opportunity that the price have gone down to say, well, now I'm going to start using it. I don't think any of you would start using marijuana if the price of marijuana went down. That's what we mean by a demand that is not very responsive to price. Economists have a term for that. They call that an inelastic demand. An inelastic demand means it is not sensitive to changes in price. And so As you can see from the third diagram that I have put in my little printout, legalization would allow supply to increase, since the state would no longer be spending law enforcement resources to restrict it, right? So if, when we criminalize marijuana, we shift in the supply curve, when we legalize it, it would shift back out, and that could be, at first glance, worrisome. As a result, the price of marijuana would fall. But because demand is not very sensitive to price, consumption would not increase by much. Now, of course, it could still possibly increase a little if you have people who find that at a lower price they can afford to buy more, or etc. And that's something that neither you nor I want. However, if the commerce of marijuana is legal, that means it can also be taxed, just like tobacco and alcohol. One of the other speakers have suggested to you a plan for taxing marijuana. You see, the tax could push the price back up and ensure that consumption would not increase, even if it was legal. Even if it was initially cheaper, then you can tax it and bring the price back up. And then if at least some of the revenue from taxation is devoted to demand reduction policies, some of the revenue from taxation is used to do prevention, education, and treatment, then even larger decreases in consumption would be possible. You see, legalization plus taxation is a win-win-win policy. The state would gain three ways. It would gain through lower law enforcement costs, allowing you to free up money for other things, either to enforce other laws better, or to just save that money and save the taxpayers some cost. A second way that you would win is additional tax revenue. Now, that sounds pretty good to me. As an economist, I say someone proposes to you a policy that would increase your revenue and decrease your cost. For any private business, that would mean higher profit. Well, as state legislators, you have an opportunity to take some measures that would increase your revenue and decrease your cost, while at the same time, and that's the third way you would win, managing consumption at the current or lower level, depending on the rate of tax that you would charge. Okay? This is an opportunity that should not be passed up. In closing, I want to add that this is not a left versus right issue. The #1 champion of such a legalization plus taxation scheme was the late Milton Friedman. Okay? Milton Friedman is the Nobel Prize-winning University of Chicago economist and also a longtime conservative icon. This is not just a project by some small group of people who want to just smoke pot. This is something that is advocated by people who say, look, governments should adopt policies that work. If you really want to reduce consumption, then don't waste taxpayers' money in policies that don't work. Instead, adopt policies that have a chance of working. And I can say that there is a rare consensus among economists of every political persuasion that legalization plus taxation would be such a policy that could work. And so I hope that the Indiana Assembly will have the farsightedness to adopt it and implement it. Thank you.
Thank you.
wouldn't your argument be equally applicable to cocaine or even opium derivatives as far as economic approach?
Yes, the argument would be equally applicable to other drugs.
I guess the other question I have, if you do increase the tax enough, you're probably going to increase the profit because very few drug dealers get a retail merchant certificate. If you tax it, and increase the tax substantially,
Yes.
well, wouldn't that also increase the profits since very few drug dealers get a retail merchant certificate?
Yeah, well, it's just like for alcohol or other substances. If the tax on alcohol was too high, you would see moonshine being produced. So the limit on the ability of the state to tax marijuana is commensurate with its ability to prevent contraband. Right? That is, so you can certainly levy a tax because most consumers who would want to buy marijuana would certainly much rather buy it in a legal store where they can be assured of its quality and would be glad to pay taxes for it rather than go and buy it from some illicit dealer. So you have there an opportunity for the government to collect some revenue. Now, not unlimited amount of revenue. You have to be mindful not to cause contraband to occur. But certainly within some reason, you should be able to collect, as has been mentioned by other speakers, quite substantial amount of revenue. And then if you want to devote even part of that revenue to demand reduction policies, treatment for addicts, education, more education in high school about the dangers of addiction and all that, then you could achieve even more reduction in consumption.
Thank you.